Have y'all ever thought about starting your own podcast but thought it would be too complicated? If your answer to that question is yes, let me tell you about Anchor. Anchor is the easiest way to start a quality podcast. First of all, it's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from any device. And on top of that, Anchor is owned by Spotify, so you have access to a full library of sound effects, background music, transitions, and even full songs that you can add in. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, and it will hook you up with sponsors so you can make money on your podcast. It's literally everything you could ever need to start a podcast all in one place. Download the free Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Is whether this team, how high their ceiling is, and I just don't know about the defense yet. So I'm going to say push. I think they'll win about 9 games. I still think they'll finish atop the division as long as Dak is healthy. For Washington, their over-under is, let's see, where's football team? They're at 8.5. I do like they have stability at quarterback. Last year they played 4 quarterbacks: Alex Smith, Taylor Heineke, Dwayne Haskins, and who was the other? They played 4 quarterbacks.
Kyle Allen?
Yeah. They had a lot of instability at that position. You can't have that in the NFL, but they still ended up winning the division at 7-9. I think there's an extra game this year. They don't have that tough of a schedule. They have a great defense that generates a lot of pressure up front. They drafted Jamin Davis, a linebacker that I really like, out of Kentucky. Super athletic, can make plays all over the football field. And they upgraded their secondary at the corner position. They brought in William Jackson III, a corner from Chicago. And their safeties are great with Landon Collins and all those guys. So I really like their defense. I like the stability that a coach like Ron Rivera brings. I think they're going to be a push as well. I have it similar to you. Actually, I have them over. I think they're going to win about 9 games as long as they stay healthy and they get solid quarterback play from Ryan Fitzpatrick. So I have Dallas and Washington, both of about 9 wins. As you said, I think the division those head-to-head matchups will decide who finishes first and who finishes second. But they'll both be in contention for playoff spot at the end of the day. And then the Giants, I'm a little higher on the Giants than some people are. I just like what I'm hearing out of Giants camp. I like the way Joe Judge, the intensity with which he seems to coach with. I think they obviously upgraded their weaponry, bringing in Kenny Golladay. I really like this defense. I think they'll be about a 8-win team in 3rd place. As long as Daniel Jones can limit those turnovers, I'm going to go over 7.5. And then the Eagles, I'm going under. I just don't see how they can get to 7 wins. I really don't like their team right now. I know they still have, they have instability at quarterback with Jalen Hurts. He did some good things last year, but I don't really know what he's going to be. They did draft Devontae Smith, which I like, I guess, but I just don't like a lot of the things that are going on in Philly right now. I think regardless, they'll still be the worst team in this division. I had it similar to you. Dallas a push at about 9 wins. Washington over at about 9 wins. The Giants over 7.5 at about 8 wins. And then the Eagles under 6.5. Probably 4 to 5 win range.
Right. And one thing that I'll say about the Eagles is I think they'll at least be a fun team. I think Jalen Hurts as a starting quarterback, that storyline itself is very intriguing to me. And I think it's interesting to see whether he'll be able to develop quick enough. You saw flashes last year, but just in terms of reading defenses and processing things a little bit quicker and a little bit more consistently. That's something that he still needs to develop. And regardless, I think it's kind of an upgrade from the quarterback play they got last year. Because, I mean, Carson Wentz, I mean, say what you want about what he did in the past, but last year I think he was probably like the level of play of maybe like the 35th best quarterback in the league. So we'll see what happens. I don't think they'll be too successful given that it's a first-year head coach. A lot of first-year coaches on that roster as well. So we'll just have to see what happens.
Right. Okay. So the next division is the NFC North. So I'll let you go first since I just did that whole tangent about the NFC East. So if you want, I can go ahead and give you the over-under win totals for these teams. So Green Bay is set at 10, flat. Let's see. The Vikings are going to be 9 flat. The Bears are set at 7.5. And then the Lions are all the way down at 4.5. So there you go.
Yeah, this is another interesting division. I mean, it's definitely not the best division in football, but it's nowhere near the worst. I mean, you look at the Bears. I mean, that team is good enough to win a few divisions in the NFL, in my opinion. They need to get better quarterback play, and I think they'll get it this year. We'll see. So starting with the Packers, it's been a really interesting offseason. I mean, so up and down, so much controversy, so much drama. Just I don't know what to expect. I mean, it's just putting all of that stuff aside. I kind of like what Aaron Rodgers did this offseason. I mean, from what I've read, I read an article on what he was doing this offseason. He took some time to improve his mental health, and he's going to try to be like more relaxed and just try to give his all as a leader this year, which is what I like to hear. And I think if he's just more carefree and lets loose a little bit, I think he'll have a lot more fun out there, and it'll help the Packers as a whole. But with all that being said, in terms of the team as a whole, I'm a little bit concerned about that offensive line. They lost their all-pro center, and they didn't really do much to replace him. Can't think of his name right now. But I'm going to have to say the over just because Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers. But if it ends up being at 10 wins, I wouldn't be surprised. I think it's a tough schedule. From what I saw earlier, I'm pretty sure, if I'm remembering correctly. So we'll see. I don't know.
Okay. What about the Vikings? Their over-under is 9 flat.
Yeah. The Vikings definitely improved this offseason. It's all just going to depend on how much that offensive line improved. We know that they made the effort to improve it. They definitely got upgrades. They drafted Christian Darrisaw. They made a few moves. They moved Riley Reeve. They got rid of him. So if that offensive line is better, they already have Dalvin Cook. And, I mean, that defense they added to that defensive line, they're getting Everson Griffin back, a longtime Viking. So I think I'm going to say push right at 9 wins.
Okay. All right. Before you advance and talk about the other 2 teams in the division, Chicago and Detroit, I'll give you my take on Green Bay and Minnesota. I'll start with Minnesota. I really, really like what they did, both in the draft and in free agency. It's really not hard to explain what happened to them last year. They were in a transition year, particularly on defense, with a lot of the younger players on that defense in the secondary. And they got crushed by injuries up front. They were supposed to have a good front seven, but they were crushed with injuries all season long. Not to make excuses, that's just what happened. I think they're going to be a lot better this year. And look, Minnesota has something that not a lot of teams have, and that's an elite running back and the potential to have a really, really good running game. So I think if they can if Dalvin Cook can, first of all, stay healthy, because he's had problems with that in the past, and this offensive line is improved, which I think it is, based on what they did in the draft. They went out and drafted the guy from Virginia Tech, Christian Darrisaw, who we had rated high in our draft stuff as one of the best tackles out there. So I really like what they did. I think Kirk Cousins, he's been fairly consistent in what he's been in his career. Last year he threw for 4,200 yards, 35 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions. And, that was sort of like a year for the Vikings. So I think he's got weapons. The defense is going to get better. And I think they're definitely going to win at least 9 games. I'm not sure I can go over the nine number, but I'll say push. I'll agree with you there. And I think they're going to be possibly a wild card team. I think they're going to, if one team that didn't make it last year, that's going to make it this year, because we see that sort of every year, it could be Minnesota. Green Bay, I agree with you here. They're going to go over. The question, of course, is Aaron Rodgers. I think he's in. I haven't read a lot lately, but based on what I can tell, he's at training camp. He's practicing. They have a lot of weapons. Devontae Adams just needs to stay healthy. Aaron Jones needs to stay healthy. I don't worry too much about the offensive line, given that Aaron Rodgers typically gets the ball out pretty fast. It's just that relationship between Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers in that front office. Is that going to flare up in the middle of the season? If it does, well, you could have some problems. But I see them winning 11 and 12 games. I mean, come on. They had a plus 140 point differential last year, which is one of the best in the NFL. So it's not like what they did last year was some sort of fluke. They got to the NFC Championship game, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so I think they'll be just fine. It's just keep an eye on what goes on in that locker room, because if that goes up in flames, well, their season's going to go up in flames.
Right.
But if they can get along, well, they have the tools to get it done.
Right. And
so I see that.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I think you can make the argument that the Packers were the second best team in football last year. I mean, obviously the Chiefs, they were very consistent all year, and then they lost their O-lineman. But, I mean, the Packers, they were right there going toe-to-toe with the champions, and they were a couple plays away from knocking them off, and they were as hot as any team I've seen in the past 10 years in the playoffs. So that team was very, very close, and I'm higher on their draft than a lot of people are. I like the pick of Eric Stokes. He's a speedy corner. So I think if their defense can just take a little step up, they were decent to good last year. If they can move from just good consistently, that would really bring this team's ceiling up just a little bit, get them over the hump.
Yeah, It's just whether or not Aaron Rodgers can settle his differences with management. That's really what's going to come down to. The locker room camaraderie, I think, is what it comes down to in Green Bay. They have the talent. They have the personnel to win games offensively. They have the scheme. And their defense is solid enough. I see them at about 11-6. That's saying everything goes well. And I have the Vikings at about 9-8. Coming in second, I think they'll be in contention for a wild card spot. And then we got to get to Chicago and Detroit. So what do you think? Just your quick take so we can move a little faster.
Yep. Chicago, I feel good about Chicago this year. I think they have one of the most underrated receiving cores in the league. I don't know if they're top 10, but they have a true number one alpha receiver in Alvin Robinson, and they have solid slot receivers and a mix of talent. I really like the collection of characters they have there, a lot of unique styles, and they have a player to fit every single style that they would need. I couldn't think of the word there, but the interesting thing for Chicago this year is how long they will go with Andy Dalton as their starting quarterback. I don't know if they get into close games early in the year. I don't know if he'll be the guy to really pull them through in those tight games. And he's not a bad quarterback. I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback. I just think if you get in a tight game, I just think that extra element of Justin Fields' legs can really make a huge difference. So I'm thinking Justin Fields gets in there around week 5, and they go about 8 wins. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay. Yeah, that would be the over for Chicago.
Yep.
The over-under is 8 or 7.5. So, I mean, they're coming off a season where they were, what was their record? They were 8-8. They lost to New Orleans in the wild card game. They had Mitchell Trubisky as their quarterback. I do think Andy Dalton is a slight upgrade. I just don't know. I think they will go to Justin Fields at some point this year. I just don't know when that will be. I know for pretty much a fact that Andy Dalton is going to start the Week 1 game against the Rams. Because I don't think it's a good idea to throw Justin Fields into the fire against that defense Week 1 and Aaron Donald. So I do think Andy Dalton, if he can stay healthy, of course, will be the starter for the first couple weeks. I do like that. It is an upgrade over Mitch Trubisky. They don't have a super tough schedule. They have some winnable games right out of the gate. Cincinnati, Detroit, Las Vegas. But their schedule does toughen up right around Thanksgiving. They got to play Tampa Bay, San Francisco, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Arizona, Green Bay, Minnesota, Seattle. So it is a gauntlet right before and right after Thanksgiving. Better quarterback play. They did lose Kyle Fuller, their shutdown corner, but they did get a decent replacement in Desmond Trufant. So it's not like their secondary is going to take a terrible turn for the worse, but at the same time, it's not going to be I really don't see a way it can be better than last year. They still have an incredible front seven. It's just the quarterback. Like, when do they go to Justin Fields? Because if they go to Justin Fields in the middle of the season against that gauntlet of a schedule, I know I'm high on Justin Fields, but I just don't know. I think I'm going to have to say, I'm going to say 7 wins. I'm going to go under, just because I don't know. And then I'm going. I don't need to talk about Detroit. They have Jared Goff as their quarterback. I mean, Say what you want. They've looked pretty terrible so far in preseason. It's preseason, but they still look pretty bad. Their over-under win total is 4.5. Am I feeling kind today? Do I say they win 5 games? I mean, this is the question we have. I'm going to say they're 4-13. I'm going under for both.
Yeah, I think they go 4-13 as well. The interesting thing is their high draft picks these last couple of years, as of right now, aren't hitting. It's early. Penei Sewell hasn't looked good this preseason, and Jeff Okudah, from their pick from last year, hasn't looked good in his time in the NFL so far. So they have some developing to do, and I trust that coaching staff to do it. I just don't think they're going to be competitive this year.
Okay. All right. So we've done the first 2 divisions. I want to skip the NFC West because I want to save the best for last, and we'll head down here to the NFC South. So I know you have a lot to say about the Buccaneers and how good you think they're going to be, but I'm really interested to hear what you think about the Saints, the Falcons, and the Panthers, where you think they'll be. So let me go ahead and read off the over-under win totals for each team. So the Buccaneers, they're going to be up here at 12 flat. That's their over-under. The Saints are an interesting team. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Their over-under win total is 9. And then the Panthers are at 7.5. And the Falcons, where are the Falcons? Falcons are 7.5 as well. Mm-hmm. So what do you think?
The weird thing is, the Falcons have a decently high ceiling, but their lowest low could be just disastrous. I mean, you look at this team. Matt Ryan's making $40 million this year. This team leads the league in veteran minimum contracts. So what that tells me is their depth might not be up to par. And late in the year, when it gets to November and December, I think that's really going to hurt them. I think they are going to be extremely fun to watch. They're going to be explosive. They're going to be a little bit like the Raiders last year, kind of come out the gates hot, maybe take like a couple games against some good teams just based on how good their offense is. And then December comes around and they'll kind of – December comes around and they'll just kind of fade away a little bit. I think they'll win 7 games. I'm gonna say over 6.5.
It's 7.5.
Oh, it is 7.5. Oh, okay. Okay, then I guess under then.
Okay, under.
Yeah.
So right at 7. Okay. What about the Panthers? They're also at 7.5.
I don't know what to make of the Panthers, man. Here's the thing. I don't know what to make of Sam Darnold. I mean, the dude has so much talent, but you just question what this new situation, like how much it'll actually benefit versus him just being what he was, you know? I mean, the Jets, I mean, they had a year where they went 7-9 and they were like kind of decent. So there's a little bit of hope there, but I don't know, man. I think they're just going to hang around 500. They're kind of just mediocre in my opinion. They have a lot of solid players, but they're really young still, and I think they need to add a couple more veterans before I'd say they're like true playoff contenders. I think they're going to hang around 500, and I'm going to say over. They're going to win 8 games. Sorry.
Okay, so I'm assuming, have the Panthers finishing in 3rd in the division?
Right,
Falcons
exactly.
Still finishing last?
Right, yep.
Okay.
I actually have the Panthers tied for second with the Saints, and I'm going to get to that in a second.
Okay.
Yeah, I have the
All right.
Saints winning 8 games as well. The Saints had to make a lot of moves in terms of just cap casualty. If you look at what they have at linebacker, I mean they kind of had to get rid of everything. They kind of had to clean house. Like just Quan Alexander's gone and Anzalone's gone. So just if you look at that linebacker core, like that's kind of the feel of this roster. They kind of just had to like sweep out the depth a little bit. So they still have the top-notch position players here and there. Like at corner, they still have Marshawn Lattimore. They still have some top guys. They still have a decent offensive line, or pretty good offensive line, actually. But at the end of the day, I just think the roster isn't as good as it was last year, and they don't have the quarterback that can manage the game well enough for them to win consistently.
Okay. And then your quick take on the Bucs.
I'm really, really high on the Bucs, man. I think they could get 15 wins. I mean, it just all depends on health. I mean, everything is already there. They brought everybody back. I think if everything falls into place, you could be looking at an extremely historic season and just possibly another MVP year for Tom Brady.
Yeah. Okay, so is that all you have to say?
Yeah, that's all I have to say on the Bucs. They're just stacked.
Okay. All right. I don't know quite what to think of this division, but I do agree with you on the Bucs. They're going to go over 12 wins. I think it could be 13 or 14. I think they're that good. As long as they stay healthy. They have depth at every single position. I think their roster from top to bottom in talent and depth is the best, if not second best, in the NFL. Tom Brady's a Hall of Fame caliber quarterback. He's going to have this team get it where it needs to go. And the second we saw them struggle to find their rhythm early last year, Tom Brady's first year in Bruce Arians' system. But I think they figured out what they like to do, what they like to run, and they're just going to come in firing on all cylinders this year. So I really like the Bucs. I think they'll win about 13 games. I think that's the realistic expectation. As long as health is basically the only question with the Bucs, because their roster is solid top to bottom. So we both agree there. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because we know the Bucs are going to win the division. We both agree. The Panthers, I just don't know what to think about the Panthers. They're coming off, what did they go last year? They went
6-10, I believe.
They were a 5-11 team. So their head coach is Matt Rule. They still have Joe Brady as offensive coordinator. The defense is super young. I do like some of the talent that they brought in. You're talking about Derek Brown on that interior defensive line. Brian Burns is the edge that they drafted, who I really like some of his potential. They've had Shaq Thompson and Denzel Perryman in the middle for a while now. And then on the back end, that's where I think they really got better. I really like Jeremy Chin as a safety. I really like A.J. Boye. They brought him in, and they drafted J.C. Horn, who some people think could end up being the best corner drafted in this draft. I don't necessarily think that, but some people say. So I think they did a good job. They got a little better on defense. The question is with the offense, obviously, and Sam Darnold. And it's really hard to define what success would be for Sam Darnold, because he's coming in with his best roster, I guess, he's coming in with the most amount of talent that he's had in his career. I mean, you have DJ Moore, you have
Terrace,
running back,
Terrace Marshall,
the receiver they drafted. You have the best running back in the game when he's healthy, in my opinion, Christian McCaffrey. He can catch. He can, do everything you want him to. So I don't know where I'm going with this. I mean, I think they'll improve from last year, but I don't think it's going to be like a significant improvement. I think they'll win maybe 2. Yeah, I think they'll be about a 7-win team. So I'm going to go under on the Panthers. The Falcons, they're interesting. They have a lot of talent, especially on the offensive side. The question for me is, what did they do to improve their defense? Because that's really where the questions lie with them. I don't really know what they did. I'm going to take a look real fast to see, because they're an interesting team. They actually generated more pressure on the quarterback than you think last year. They were top 10 in pass rush win rate. They just didn't finish a lot of those plays. And they were pretty bad situationally on all sides of the ball. So it looks like they didn't do a whole lot. They brought in Barkevious Mingo, who's a solid linebacker. Brandon Copeland, who I guess is a sort of depth piece at that linebacker position. But they didn't do a whole lot. They do have Kyle Pitts. They do have a lot of talent offensively. Matt Ryan will be competent at the very least. I guess they still have Todd Gurley. Is that right? Who's their running back? I think it's Todd Gurley.
They have Todd Gurley, and I think they drafted someone. Let me see. Falcons running back depth.
They brought in wait.
I think they brought in a veteran.
Yeah, they brought in Mike Davis, who I think is from the Panthers.
Yeah, from the Panthers.
So I don't. They were 4-12 last year, and according to The Athletic, they were 1-8 in one-score games. So that could, signal they were obviously bad situation, like I said, but they also may have had some bad luck last year. I think they'll get a little luckier this year. They won't have the whole Dallas fiasco happen again. A new coach, a new coaching staff, I think will help. I think they'll be 8-9. I'll say over. And then I agree with you on the Saints. I think they'll be about an 8-win team as well. They had to gut their roster because of the salary cap situation they were in. They lost a lot. Obviously, Drew Brees retired. I'm hearing a lot of good things about both Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston. I do think, obviously, Jameis Winston will start. I don't know the situation with Michael Thomas. That's a big question for me. He obviously had some disagreements with the front office about a surgery he had in the offseason. And I think he might miss some time. He's been banged up the past couple seasons. They did lose some depth at the receiver position. I believe they lost Emmanuel Sanders. But it's the Saints. I trust the owner. I trust the GM, and I trust the coach, Sean Payton, one of the best in the league year to year. I think that will get them 8 wins alone. And they still have solid players on that defense, as you said. So it's under because their over-under is 9. I think they'll win 8 games. So we're sort of similar. We just disagree slightly on the Falcons. Or, wait a minute. You said the Falcons were going to be over, correct? 8 wins?
No, I said under. I said 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's where we...
But I just said they could possibly start hot, just because Arthur Smith and his offensive system fits really well.
That's where we slightly disagree. I have the Panthers being slightly worse than you do, and you have the Falcons being slightly better than them. All right. Or I have the I have the Falcons being slightly better than you, and you have the Panthers being slightly better than I think. Okay.
Yeah. And last thing is just those three teams are just going to cannibalize each other. I think. I don't see any of those teams reaching the wild card. They're right around the same level as each other.
I agree. That's why it's an interesting division. Okay, so now we saved the best for last, and that's the NFC West. So I think for this division, we'll just take it a little bit slower, and we'll go team by team, just to break it down a little bit more. So let's start with the Cardinals. So the Cardinals are I'm assuming they're around 8. Yeah, they're 8.5. So I think that's right where it should be. What are your thoughts about the Cardinals?
To me, it's all about Cliff Kingsbury and Kyle Murray. What I saw in the preseason so far, I mean, it hasn't been too impressive, to be honest. A lot of miscommunications on routes, a lot of just disorganization, and you would expect more in year 3, especially from a guy who is supposed to be this offensive mastermind. And I like the moves they made, especially defensively. They added Zaven Collins, another tall, quick, really moves well for a big linebacker, just an old school linebacker, and Zaven Collins out of Tulsa. They got him in the first round. I'm really high on him. I really like his game. But I don't think they improved the defense enough to be elite by any stretch. That's for sure. I mean they got J.J. Watt. I think he will add a lot in terms of leadership in the locker room as well as what he will produce on the field. But I don't know, man. I'm not too high on the Cardinals this year. I was last year, but I'm kind of exactly the opposite of what I was last year.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with you. I just don't know what I'm going to get week to week with the Cardinals. I think that's sort of their problem. I like a lot of talent they have. There's no question. I mean,
Right.
We're talking about one of the best, if not the best, receiver in the game, and D-Hop, DeAndre Hopkins. You have a trio there that I really like with him, Christian Kirk, and A.J. Green, who sort of struggles to stay on the field, but if he can, he still can be a weapon for you. You also have Andy Isabella in the slot. He can produce for you. You drafted Rondale Moore. So I like a lot of the talent and the depth you have at a lot of these offensive positions. They're going to score points. I mean, that's just a fact. Last year, Kyler Murray he set the record for most games in a season with both the passing and rushing touchdown. He had 9 of those last year. So he's obviously lethal with his legs, but also with his arm. They did hit sort of a roadblock down the stretch last year. They went 2-5 over their final 7 games. So it's just that consistency week to week. What will they look like come December when the weather gets cold, because they are a dome team? So can they play better down the stretch? Can Cliff Kingsbury sort of, I guess, rally the troops, so to speak? And this is kind of the same on defense. I just don't know what I'm going to get week to week. They have one of the best safeties in the NFL, maybe one of the most underrated players in the NFL, Budda Baker. Back there, they picked up Malcolm Butler, who's still a solid corner. He can get it done for you. He's not shut down, but he'll get the job done. They did lose Patrick Peterson. They do have some questions back there, but I think they'll be fine enough. I like their linebacker depth. It's all about the development of these young linebackers with Isaiah Simmons and Zayden Collins. You also have Jordan Hicks, who's been pretty consistent. And then the defensive line. You obviously have J.J. Watt and Chandler Jones on the outside rushing the passer. So it's just a question of consistency for me with the Cardinals. They're sort of a younger team on defense, and they haven't really been together all that much. Not a whole lot of experience. And I just think they're in a bad spot. Like, if they were in any other division in the NFC, I'd probably have them making the playoffs, or at least being in better contention. But since they're in the NFC West, I mean, I think they got to go at least 500, like 3-3 against those divisional opponents to even have a chance at the playoffs. So I think I agree with you for the Cardinals. It's just consistency week to week, and what do they look like when you have to be able to run the football, you have to be good situationally in November and December when the weather changes and all that heats up, or cools down. So, yeah, I'll say about 8 wins as well.
Yep.
Okay. I think the most interesting team in this division is the 49ers. So why don't we talk about them for a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. The Niners, I'm a little bit higher on the idea of lighting a fire under someone, like going in the draft and getting a replacement for a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo. I think that will really make him bring his best, which is, I mean, I think around like the 20th best quarterback in the NFL, which is really all they need in this offense. He just has to be solid and take care of the football. And I think he can do that. So with that being said, I think they're going to get good enough quarterback play as long as Jimmy Garoppolo stays healthy. And that's been the problem. I think that's really the biggest reason they drafted Trey Lance. I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo, I mean, he's solid as a pocket passer. He moves around the pocket well. He manipulates the pocket. He's not the best deep ball thrower, but he's good in the intermediate game, short passing game, and he's solid in play action. So really, I think I'm a little higher on Jimmy Garoppolo than most people are, and in turn, I'm higher on the 49ers.
So the over-under is 10.5. What are you feeling?
I'm thinking 11 wins if they stay healthy. I think getting Nick Bosa back, getting Dee Ford back, their pass rush isn't going to be as good as they were in 2019 with the loss of DeForest Buckner, but I think Javon Kinlaw can take a step forward, and I think that's going to be enough in terms of pass rush, and I think this team defensively is well coached enough to plug some of the gaps in the middle. I think they're a little bit squishy in the middle and defensive line, but there's not another linebacker in the league where there's not a lot of linebackers in the league that I'd choose to fill run gaps than Fred Warner. Fred Warner is the real deal. So I think the 49ers, they're in a good spot, man. I think I don't have them quite as Super Bowl contenders. I think they're going to get second in this division. And I think they'll be really solid this year.
All right. Yeah, for me, it all comes down, and I know some people aren't going to like to hear this, and we can't really predict it, but it all comes down to health. Because there's no question in my mind that if we were to rank rosters in the NFL, just on paper, the 49ers would probably rank in the top 5 or 6 rosters, top to bottom, in the entire league. And I think that's one of the reasons why the betting sites have their win total so high. 10.5. I do like the number. I think they're going to be a 10-win team. I'm going to go under the win total just because I still don't know if they're going to stay healthy. They've had problems galore in the past. I don't know if that just magically fixes itself. Hopefully it does, but I just don't know yet. I have a little uncertainty there. But, I mean, look, I think you bring up a good point. Maybe drafting Trey Lance lights a fire under Jimmy Garoppolo, and maybe that helps them. But the problem with Jimmy Garoppolo is, again, he can't stay on the football field for more than 2 consecutive games. So you got to protect him. You got to run the football a lot. I think that's the identity of this team. You got to give the ball to Raheem Mostert a lot. And I know he's injury prone as well.
And I like their draft pick to Trey Sermon. He's going to be really good in that system as well.
Getting depth there was critical. And getting depth at all positions is critical for them. But I think they have it. They did lose Emmanuel Sanders, but they do still have Brandon Ayuk, who I really like. They have Deebo Samuel. George Kittle's coming back healthy. Mohamed Sanu's been a solid number 3-4 receiver for years. They brought him in. So, look, I mean, they're solid everywhere. The defense, I mean, they're saying there's no linebacker better than Fred Warner, and I'm not necessarily going to disagree with that. We could have arguments, but that's for another day. Their defensive line's fantastic. They have Nick Bosa coming back. Eric Armstead on the interior with Javon Kinlaw. I really like that. An athletic D-line with D Ford. Man, it's nasty. And then on the back end, they're solid. They're not elite, but they're solid. So they're solid at every single position. It's just depth and the war of attrition. Can they stay healthy? But I still think they're a good enough team to get to about 10 wins. I'm not going to go over just because I don't know, but I still think they're a 10-win wild card playoff team.
Right, and that would be. I feel like that would be a pretty solid year. You couldn't be mad at that as a 49ers fan.
Look, I mean, with what they have, if they can just get into the playoffs healthy, they're definitely capable of making a run at the Super Bowl. But regardless of what you think about Jimmy Garoppolo, we've seen it before. I mean, they're definitely capable. They could be dangerous come playoff time.
Yeah, and one hot take about Brandon Ayuk, I think by the end of this year he'll be a top 10 wide receiver.
Ooh.
I know that's a hot take. But I think Brandon Ayuk has kind of Adam Thielen level potential. I think he's going to be around the 7 to 10 range in terms of number 1 wide receiver. So we'll see what happens there.
Okay, so you said you think the 49ers are going to be second in this division. So that means one of Los Angeles or Seattle is going to be third, and one's going to be first, I assume. So What do you think?
Yep, I have the Rams winning 10 games. They're really tough to predict. I kind of feel like Stafford might get hurt and miss like 2 or 3 games. That's kind of what's been happening every year, but I don't think that'll be a death sentence for them. I think they'll be okay and they'll kind of stay afloat. I think it'll be 10 wins, and I think they'll be in that wild card range. If you look at this team, they lost a few guys in free agency. They lost Troy Hill, who was incredible opposite of Jalen Ramsey last year as a undrafted rookie, I believe. So that's going to be a pretty significant loss, I feel like, because finding corners opposite of Jalen Ramsey is going to be just like imperative for this team in the next few years, especially with no draft picks. And I just worry about their depth. Really, I love the coaching staff and the culture they have put together. I'm thinking their defense is going to be. I don't think it'll be elite again. I think it'll be somewhere around the Baltimores of the world, kind of in that 5 to 10 range, aggressive defense that forces turnovers and can make plays, but also gives up a little bit of yards. And I think they'll be solid. I think they'll be, right, like I said, around that 10-win mark.
Okay. So that would put them at the under because they're also 10.5. Okay, what about the Seahawks?
Okay. For the Seahawks, I have them winning this division. I feel really good about Russell Wilson in this kind of outside zone, Kyle Shanahan style scheme. We talked about this a little bit last night when we were on the phone. I just think when you put an elite quarterback in a system that makes it easier for quarterbacks to succeed, it's just set up for an explosion. And that's exactly what we saw from Aaron Rodgers 2 years ago. And I think we could see the same thing again from Russell Wilson in this first year in this new offense. It's just my one concern is, will Pete Carroll be uncomfortable letting Russ cook again? If he gets uncomfortable and he just starts running the ball and killing clock, that's going to lower the ceiling of this team. I mean, as much as I love a good team that can run the ball down people's throats, I mean, that in today's NFL, you got to put up points. And if you have Russell Wilson, I want the ball in his hands as much as possible. So running that play action game, just kind of being aggressive with these really solid wide receivers out on the outside. They added Gerald Everett. I really like that move. They drafted a lineman. I think that was kind of one of Russ's requests, which is good to see. They're following Russ's requests. And yeah, just overall, I think this team, I think Russell Wilson will be right there in the MVP discussion. I think Jamal Adams is going to have a much better year, and I think he'll be the leader of that defense.
Yeah, I agree with you. Seattle's going to win the division. Vegas Insider has the over-under for the Seattle Seahawks, who won 12 games last year. And if you know anything about football, and I've been following football since Russell Wilson came into the league, Russell Wilson, in his first 9 years in the NFL, has not won less than 9 games in a season in his career. He's been 9-7 or better every single season. And that's with terrible offensive lines, not the weapons, not the level of weapons he has now, and defenses. Like, he's that good, and he can overcome. He's one of those quarterbacks that can overcome a deficit in talent. So I don't know why they have it at 9.5. I'm going way over. I think they win at least 12 games again this year, because I don't really see a way they got worse this offseason. I mean, they re-signed Chris Carson. They still have Rashad Penny. They're going to have a good running game. We know that for a fact. They added Gerald Everett, which should, again, add another dimension to that offense. They still have Tyler Lockett. They still have DK Metcalf. They still have the tight end they drafted last year, and Colby Parkinson, who was hurt, I think, a lot of last year. They still have Will Disley. So they have depth there. Their offensive line, I think, got better with the addition of Gabe Jackson, the guard from the Raiders. They still need to give Dwayne Brown, that left tackle, a contract, I think. Russell Wilson's been begging for that for a while now. They got Jamal Adams the contract, but they still need to give Brown the contract he deserves. He's really good. He's a strong point of this offensive line. But I think their offensive line got better. They still have all the weapons. They have a quarterback that's good enough to be an MVP, who just doesn't get the respect he deserves year in and year out, because he doesn't get any MVP votes ever, it seems. I think he still doesn't have any in his career, if I'm not mistaken. And then the defense actually came on late last year. They were pretty good. The addition of Carlos Dunlap at the trade deadline helped their pass rush. They still have Poona Ford on the interior and Al Woods at those defensive tackle positions. They're going to be good at stopping the run. Bobby Wagner is a solid veteran, solid leader in that locker room. Jordan Brooks, I think, is going to take a step up as long as he stays healthy, which he wasn't last year. And then they have a solid secondary. I just don't know if they do have some question at cornerback, but I think they're good enough. Pete Carroll will figure it out. I just don't see a way they don't win at least 11 games. I think Vegas Insider, some of these books are really messing up on this. This is the Seattle Seahawks we're talking about. They're in the playoffs year in and year out, and they're a dangerous football team. I will say, the past couple of years, Seattle's been a team that started really fast out of the gates. Like last year, they started 5-0. I believe the year before that, they were like 4-0. I think this year it'll be a little bit of the opposite because they do have a pretty tough schedule coming out. They're just going to have to survive Indianapolis, Tennessee, Minnesota, San Francisco, the Rams, Pittsburgh, and New Orleans. Those first 7 games are tough, but after Thanksgiving, it really lightens up. They have winnable games against Houston, Chicago, Detroit, Arizona, Washington, the Rams, and the 49ers. So, I don't know. I think it could be a little bit of a flip the script sort of thing, but I still think the Seahawks, they're going to be a top 3 seed in the NFC when it's all said and done. And then the Rams, I think you're right. They did lose some talent on that defense, but I still think the defense is going to be solid. And look, it all depends on what you think about Matt Stafford. He's been in Detroit, a dysfunctional franchise for all these years. He's finally out of there. He's got a competent, one of the best offensive coaches in the league in Sean McVay. He's got a good running game behind him. He's got good weapons, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, all those guys. They just lost some talent on that defense. So, 10.5, I think it's right about right for them. I think I'm going to have to go under just because I have to see it before I can believe it. So I think Seattle's going to win 12 games. They're going to go way over 9.5. I think the Rams will still be a good team. There's definitely going to be 3 playoff teams from this division alone. I think we both agree there. But the Rams will still be solid with 10 wins. 49ers as well with 10 wins. And then the Cardinals, they're just in a bad situation with the way this division is set up. So there you go.
Right. Yeah. That's it for the NFC, y'all. We're going to get back in here soon and record for the AFC. I have a fantasy draft coming up, so I'll let y'all know how that goes. I have that on Saturday. But yeah, we're right around an hour and 20 minutes or so. So that's going to be it for episode 70 of the Raw Prospect Podcast. Make sure to subscribe, like the video if you're on YouTube. Follow us on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, everything, or whatever podcast app you listen on. And thanks for listening, y'all. Happy football season. Peace out.